Pardon the delay. Thank you.
What you doing to me, mama? Ow! Come take it out.
All right, it looks like we are ready to start. Good morning. I think we have a very long day ahead of us, a few get through in terms of basics. But before we start everything else, there is a security thing that we need to do. Doors, exits, and everything else that you need to know about. Can you please come forward and do your thing?
Good morning, honored guests. My name is Venolia from the Apartheid Museum. House rules. So we've got our bathrooms just as you exit. On your left-hand side, you will see the bathrooms, the ladies and gentlemen. At the back, it's the exit door. So in case of an emergency, please assemble right in front, and then we'll have our escort that will assemble you out to the parking lot and also the public parking. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is the anthem, both anthems, national and continental, and thereafter we'll have the DM opening the event. Can we please go ahead with the national anthem? Can I ask you to rise?
Saponayo
Sorry for that, I think that's a cue for us to sit down. Deputy Minister Andries Snell, please come forward to do an official welcoming and opening of the event. Let's please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very, very much, Program Director, Professor Mcebisi Ndlechana. A very, very good morning to all. May I ask that before we proceed any further, and in keeping or in following on from the singing of our national and continental anthems, that we all rise and please join me in reciting the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past. Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. Respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi Sikelel' Afrika. Morena Buluka Sitjhaba sa heso. Khotsi in South Africa. God bless South Africa. Mudzimu fatuchedza Africa. Hosi katikisa Africa. Thank you very much. I think that the practice of reciting the preamble to the Constitution of the practice that we should normalize whenever we meet in government, as the judiciary, in the legislatures, and in our society, in our schools, our universities, our workplaces. Because that preamble contains a very powerful message also a very powerful commitment, a rec- but also a very powerful commitment, a recognition of that indeed we are one nation with one constitution, and that we've gathered to reflect, to renew, and to recommit to the values of the Constitution. And the fact that we have amongst us the Minister of Justice and Development, Judiciary, represented by Acting Judge President Aubrey Ledwaba. Thank you very, very much, and you are most welcome. We all have a duty to guard the Constitution, but I think within that, the judiciary has a very special place. Also, elected leaders from all spheres of government, national, provincial, and local. And then a very, very special word of welcome to the heads and the members of those institutions created by our Constitution to support and defend our constitutional democracy. And in particular, Ms. Tsakani Maluleke, the Auditor General, thank you very, very much. The Deputy Chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, Ms. Janet Love, thank you very much for your presence. We're also very honored to have amongst us I wanted to say new, but I think he's already very well settled in, so we can't say that anymore. But the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Motibi. We're also very thankful that we've been joined by Ms. Togo Mpumlwana and Professor Sarah Muswetsa, who will participate in our panel. But I think we're particularly heartened also by the depth and the breadth of representation from civil society, from academia, from the legal fraternity, the private sector, faith communities, youth representatives, and a wide range of organizations and individuals participating also online. Your presence here today, I said, really embodies and sends a very powerful message of our commitment as a nation to the defense of our Constitution and our constitutional democracy as we kick off this 30th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution. So with those words of welcome, it then gives me great pleasure to ask the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development to come to the podium. Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Nel. I had to adjust. The heights are different. I thought my heel will do. Let me acknowledge our program director and our facilitator, Prof. Mtlechana. Thank you for agreeing to help us in this day as participating and facilitating the conversations that we want to do. Acting Judge President of the Gauteng High Court, Judge Ledwaba, Deputy Minister of Constitutional Development and Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Andrew Snell, Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Honorable Howley, the NDPP, Advocate Motibi, Auditor General South Africa, Mr. Tsakani Maluleke, CEO of HSRC, Prof. Muswetsa, Mam Pumlwane, I'll call Mam Pumlwane, so pardon me, to me she's Mam. So I won't say Miss or anything. That's why I'm calling her like that. The board of chair of SAWIC, but also an activist for years, as most of us would know, in terms of women issues in the country. She has many roles that she plays, so I decided on the SAWIC one, Mampumlwana. DG of Home Affairs and acting DG of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and DG of Home Affairs is also the co-chairperson of the JCPS Cluster Technical Team. Representatives of Chapter 9 institutions, specifically acknowledging the Deputy Chair of IEC, Ms. Love, representatives of UN bodies and UN organizations that are here, representatives of civil society organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, both here physical, and those that have joined us on the virtual platform, because we understood that there are many people who would want to participate, and therefore we've made that provision, as we will be later engaging with them as well. Today, as we launch our annual Human Rights Month, we do so in the year that we celebrate three very significant events whose occurrence, amongst others, brought us the human rights we enjoy today. The 50th anniversary of the youth uprising in Soweto, the 70th anniversary of the 1956 Women's March to the Union buildings, and the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution. One was courageous challenge to the oppressive apartheid regime to concede to the demands by women for their basic human rights, and the other was to mark the victory of many years to struggle against colonization and oppression. Because of the adoption of the Constitution 30 years ago, we now have a foundation upon which we can strive towards the common vision of unity for unity in diversity, while strengthening the culture of respect for human rights and the rule of law in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution marking process was one of the most inclusive process in modern times. The inclusivity of the process is best described by Justice Albie Sachs when he said the following about the Constitution, I quote, "We wanted a Constitution that was smiling to the people, but it mustn't be a sneer smile or an insincere mask of a smile. The smile must come from inside, that people may believe in it because of its authenticity. And the smile contains tears and sadness and a knowledge of imperfection," unquote. The Constitution is a testament that wise men and women of all races, religions, and diverse culture freely came together to weave a new nation in a South Africa that belongs to all who, in a South Africa that belongs to all who live in it, both black and white. While the years that followed the adoption have been neither seamless nor without contradiction, the constitutional project that was set in motion then has, over 30 years, reshaped the political, legal, social construction of this country in ways that deserves both serious reflection and, where warranted, genuine acknowledgement. This is so low, and I'm battling to see from that side. I thought my eyesight is quite good, so I think, oh, Prof, yes, I guess it's the denial that we've got. While the years that followed the adoption have been neither seamless nor without contradiction, the constitutional project that was set in motion then has, over 30 years, reshaped the political, legal, social construction of this country in ways that deserves both serious reflection and, where warranted, genuine acknowledgement. To appreciate the magnitude of what the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa in 1996 represented, one must first reckon with what preceded it. For over 3 centuries, colonization and then apartheid did not merely discriminate, it institutionalized and systematized human degradation, and in particular of the Black South African majority. Both colonial and apartheid regimes implanted racial hierarchy into the fabric of the law itself, so that the very institution that ought to have protected citizens became institutions of oppressions. Justice was not blind, it was deliberately sighted, and it saw race. What the negotiated transition of the early 1990s accomplished, therefore, was not merely a political handover, but a civilization or civilizational reorientation. The interim constitution of 1993 described the moment as a historical breach, as it symbolized a passage from strife and injustice to peaceful coexistence premised on open democratic government and the pursuit of universal human rights. That breach led, ladies and gentlemen, in 1996 to the final constitution, a document that did not simply list rights, but rooted them as the supreme law of the land, binding the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary alike. Critical, the Constitution was never designed to be a static settlement. From its inception, it was conceived as a living framework, one capable of responding to an ever-changing legal, social, and political context. As reflected by the Reconstruction and Development Program's existence on integrated, people-driven, sustainable development, the Constitution built into its very structure the expectation that the work of transformation would be ongoing, that rights would be progressively realized, and that the institutions of justice would continue to evolve in response to the demands placed upon them. The past 30 years, ladies and gentlemen, examine honestly, reveal that the Constitution has done much of what it promised, even as implementation has too often fallen short of aspirations. Perhaps the most consequential achievement has been the structural integration of the judicial system itself. What this record reveals, taken together, is that the constitutional framework was not static. It was built to grow from its very foundation and ultimately respond to the shifting demands of justice, the evolution of rights, and to the changing context of society still working through the inherited inequalities that the Constitution was designed to dismantle. That is a significant claim, and like all significant claims, it must be tested against evidence. The evidence for what the Constitution has delivered to the justice system is on its own terms substantial. Where once there were 11 disparate departments, there is now a unified framework. The Superior Courts Act 10 of 2013 rationalized the court's hierarchy, bringing coherence to a system that had been deliberately fractured under apartheid. The Constitution's 17th Amendment Act of 2012 affirmed the Constitutional Court as apex status in all matters, affirming its role as the final arbiter of the Republic's supreme law. These reforms are, in themselves, expressions of the principle that no legislative or executive action, regardless of its political weight, sits beyond the reach of judicial scrutiny. That is the foundation on which the rule of law, in any meaningful sense, demands and depends. Equally significant has been the expansion of access to justice, and the direction of that expansion is as important as its own scope. The Traditional Courts Act 9 of 2022 represent a considered effort to align customary dispute resolution with constitutional values, sweeping away the last remnants of the Black Administration Act 38 of 1927, a statute whose continued existence within a democratic dispensation had long been an anomaly that the constitutional framework could not indefinitely accommodate. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the Land Court Act 6 of 2023, likewise, created a dedicated forum for the resolution of land disputes, a matter of no small consequence in a country whose land history remains one of its most contested and emotionally charged inheritance. These developments are significant because access to justice is a substantial and substantive constitutional obligation, one that extends beyond the mere existence of courts to encompass whether those courts are practically accessible, procedurally comprehensive, and institutionally equipped to serve those who have historically been furthest from them. If the justice system provides one category of proof, the advancement of human rights provides another. And it is here that the Constitution's responsiveness is perhaps most vividly demonstrated. At the nub of the constitutional dispensation lies the Bill of Rights, Chapter 2, does something ambitious that 30 years on still deserves appreciation. Specifically in that it refuses to treat civil and political rights as somehow more real or more pressing than socio-economic rights. The rights to equality, to human dignity, to privacy, and to freedom of expression are articulated, ladies and gentlemen, alongside the rights to housing, healthcare, food, water, and education. These rights are far beyond aspirational ornaments. They are justiciable entitlements enforceable in courts of law. What makes this entrenchment particularly significant is that it does not freeze them in time. The constitutional interpretive framework obliges courts to develop the context and content of rights in a manner that responds to the present-day circumstances and evolving understanding of human dignity. Legislation giving effect to this vision has progressively extended the Constitution's reach into the everyday encounters of citizens and encounters that the citizens have with government, addressing unfair discrimination, protecting access to information, and insisting on transparency, lawfulness, and reasonableness as conditions of legitimate administrative action. Our Constitution has set out the framework for our human rights realization discourse, and the Constitutional Court, ladies and gentlemen, has been a pillar that has interpreted the core minimum of these provisions as set out by the Bill of Rights. The Constitutional Court had an opportunity to interpret Section 26 and 27 of the Constitution in the Treatment Action Campaign, TAC case, Grootboom case, Sobramani case, and Mazibuko cases, in the manner that was expected to give proper guidance to the constitutional interpretation of socio-economic rights in South Africa and what relief would be appropriate in the circumstances of the cases in question. And we call them landmark cases because they changed policy and in the manner that government responds. In the Grootboom case, the Constitutional Court had to decide whether government has the obligation to take reasonable legislative and other measures within its available resources in order to provide access to adequate housing. The Constitutional Court held that the provision of socio-economic rights by the state is subject to the principle of progressive realization of these rights and the availability of resources. Rights, ladies and gentlemen, however, rights, however carefully drafted, require guardians. Chapter 9 of the Constitution recognized with considerable foresight and accordingly established a set of independent state institutions whose specific mandate is to strengthen and sustain constitutional democracy. This institution represents a deliberate constitutional choice to institutionalize oversight rather than leave the protection of these rights to the discretion of those in power. They were built into the Constitution itself rather than created an ordinary legislation. And this reflects a deliberate choice to implement oversight at the highest level of the legal order of our country. Again, the most foundational category of proof, the deepening of the rule of law itself, underpinning of this is the constitutional insistence on the rule of law and judicial independence, principles that may sound abstract until one considers what their absence looks like. The judiciary authority to review and strike down legislation and executive actions has been exercised and has been exercised decisively. Sometimes as well, AJP, to our discomfort as the executive. Courts have invalidated unconstitutional measures, and crucially, those decisions have, in the main, been respected. This is not a trivial matter, ladies and gentlemen. The separation of powers function as a genuine constraint on government, not merely a theoretical diagram. Former Chief Justice Pius Langa, in his 2006 Stellenbosch address, articulated what he termed transformative constitutionalism, describing the Constitution not as a static settlement, but as a tool for ongoing change, an instrument that must heal the wounds of the past and guide the country to a better future. That framing captures something essential in that constitutionalism is not an event, but a process. It sets a standard that is demanding precisely because it is ongoing, one that requires not only that the law be sound, but that its benefits be genuinely and equitably extended to those that the law was designed to protect. What the record of these 30 years also reveals, however, is that the communities that bore the heaviest cost of apartheid's deliberate impoverishment have not experienced the pace of transformation that the Constitution's provision reasonably implied. Those who were systematically denied access to property, education, and the basic conditions of a dignified life have found that while the legal order has been fundamentally recast, their material circumstances have not shifted with commensurate decisiveness. Corruption, persistent resources constraint, and uneven implementations have each, in different measure, drawn the pace of delivery away from what the legal framework envisioned. The consequence is a constitutional democracy in which the law has advanced with considerably greater speed and clarity than the material reality it was expressed or expressly designed to transform, not because the framework is wanting, but because the administrative and financial conditions necessary to give it full effect have not been consistently sustained. And this can be for various reasons, ladies and gentlemen. This is the central tension that the 3 decades of constitutional democracy has not yet resolved. The framework has proven its durability in the courts, the legislature, in the institutions created to give it effect. What has not kept pace is the translation of that framework into the daily lives of those it was most urgently intended to serve. That remains the most consequential measure by which this constitutional project will continue to be assessed. We are gathered here, ladies and gentlemen, today to launch a year-long commemoration of the 30 years of the adoption of the Constitution, which will be undertaken under the theme, 30 years of our Constitution, one Constitution, one nation. Reflect, renew, and recommit. Just like the constitution-making process, national commemoration we envisage will be an inclusive initiative involving multiple stakeholders, including government departments, Chapter 9 institutions, civil society, organized labor, business, traditional and religious leaders, youth formation and educational institutions, women, and people with disabilities. Cabinet approved a concept document that guides this year-long celebration, and an IMC that will oversee this work, chaired by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, has been established. The program will include public dialogues, civic education, cultural events, youth engagements, symbolic events at historical sites such as Sharpeville and Constitutional Hill, and other community-driven initiatives to deepen constitutional awareness and social cohesion. We will also this year host an international conference on access to justice as part of reflecting on the journey traveled and renewal of our commitment to the principles of our constitutional democracy. We call on all South Africans to join us in these initiatives so that we can collectively reflect about the 30th of our Constitution, progress and challenges, and recommit ourselves to the democratic project. The panel discussion that will follow will kickstart the reflection, and I hope that it will also ignite a spark in all South Africans to start thinking deeply about our constitutional democracy. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, with the words of Tata Madiba, the founding president of our democratic nation. When he spoke in 1994 on the occasion of the adoption of the Constitution, he said, I quote, "We stand today before our people and humanity to present this, our new basic law of the land, whose founding principles of human dignity, non-racialism and non-sexism, and whose commitment to universal adult suffrage, regular elections, and multi-party democracy are immutable. This is our national soul, our compact with one another and as citizens, underpinned by our highest aspirations and our deepest apprehensions," unquote. Our pledge is, I quote again, "Never and never again shall the laws of our land rend our people apart or legalize their oppression and repression. Together we shall march hand in hand to a brighter future," unquote. We launched today the Human Rights Month and 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution as we begin our conversations, our activities, as we reflect, as we renew, and as we recommit ourselves to a democratic project. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that food for thought. I'm sure you've gotten us thinking on a number of things. I know my students think that this Constitution is just a sellout document. They raise all sorts of things that have not been done. So, of course, you will be part of our discussion later to answer some of these questions, which you have provoked, so I'm sure you have answers. We now move to the unveiling of the 30th anniversary of the Constitution logo. Before or after that, we then move to the discussion phase of our session. Are you ready to?
Celebrating 30 years of the Constitution. This logo is a commemorative emblem celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996 to 2026. It is rich with national symbolism, combining the colors of the South African flag with legal and democratic imagery. 1. The central 30 numeral. The most prominent feature is the large number 30, representing 3 decades of constitutional democracy. The 3 The top half is coloured red and yellow, while the bottom curve is blue, mimicking the palette of the national flag. Inside the bottom curve is a black silhouette of a person holding the scales of justice in one hand and a gavel in the other, symbolizing the rule of law and the judiciary. The zero. This is rendered as a circular ring using the green and black colours of the flag. Inside the zero is an illustration of the Constitution booklet itself, titled The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa 1996, with the commemorative dates 1996 to 2026 written below it. 2. The circular borders and text. The logo is framed by two concentric circular text paths that define the mission of the anniversary. Top arc displays the slogan One Constitution, One Nation in bold black capital letters. Bottom arc features the call to action Reflect, Renew, Recommit, rendered in green, red, and yellow, the colours of the flag. Separators, small icons of the protea, South Africa's national flower, in flag colours separate the top and bottom text arcs. 3. National symbols. Colour palette. The entire logo strictly adheres to the 6 colours of the South African flag: black, yellow, green, white, red, and blue. The king protea. At the very bottom centre, there is a large, stylized orange and yellow protea. This flower is a traditional symbol of South African resilience and oneness. Supporting text. Flanking the protea are the words Years of the Constitution, which completes the 30 in the centre to read 30 Years of the Constitution. 4. Full logo.
Thank you. We now move to the discussion session part. We had intended to have 3 speakers. We still have 3 speakers, but the identity of one has changed. The minister is our 3rd participant. She couldn't just say all these things and then quit. She has to reflect. A lot of things have happened. Her own government has been in charge of this constitution for the last 30 years, so she must account. We have Professor Sarah Muswetsa from the HSRC, a sociologist by training. We also have Mrs. Mpumlwana, an activist on gender issues with a lot of experience and insight. And then we'll be joined by the minister. I have asked for Sarah's bio to be projected behind me briefly instead of me reading all sorts of things. I'm sure it will be projected later on. In the meantime, Sarah, you are at the HSRC, you have dealt with these things. There are many things that we can talk about. This is a human rights issue. There are issues of rights, socioeconomic rights, gender rights. To what extent have we become a kind of humane society? This country, up until 30 years ago, was very unkind. We have done all sorts of things, pledged all manner of things. Have we gotten somewhere to achieving some of these things? We would like you to reflect on some of those and any other issue you want to reflect upon. I'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah, please come in front.
Thank you very much, Professor Ndlejana. If it wasn't for this democracy, Professor Ndlejana, these titles that we have, Professor, Doctor, I don't think they would have been realized, right? Let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting the HSRC, and this is the first time that I don't have to fiddle with the mic. And I rise on the protocol, but let me do a special thank you and acknowledge our minister and deputy minister and all senior honorable members in the room. I've been given 15 minutes and I'll try to stick to it, and I have known Professor Ndlejana, I think, for over 20 years, and I know that he's going to stand here. Don't worry, he won't be intimidating me. Let me say a couple of things. We are indeed in a constitutional democracy. I think it would not be proper of us to acknowledge the developments, the global developments this weekend that have indeed left all of us puzzled and of course wondering where is the world going to. And we are reminded again of how privileged we are as South Africans to be sitting in this room and not be worried indeed about this room being bombarded or missiles coming our way. Maybe at least for now, as they say, today's your neighbor, tomorrow might be you. So let's not indeed be complacent about the constitutional democracy that we enjoy today. Minister, who would have ever thought that in 30 years of democracy, the courts and what you are overseeing will be the most important pillar for now of our democracy. And it is indeed in capable hands, as we have seen over the years. Let me say a couple of things about the HSRC and what I want to address us on, and I'm glad that the book has arrived. I want to talk about the future of South Africa we want, democracy at 30, and I want to share with you some of the insights from the communities that we've talked to and interacted with. I'll give you just a snippet of some of the communities that we were talking to around constitutional democracy, human rights, socioeconomic rights. To be provocative, the introduction title is "The People Shall Govern?" ? Democracy at 30 through the eyes of South African communities. 30 years of democracy, it is in a former homeland, insights and experiences. We're talking Qwaqwa here. Who remembers Vuwani? There's a chapter on Vuwani, and it reads, "The Vuwani we want." A journey of hope as Vuwani schools rise from the ashes. Lest we forget. Chapter 4 is on Mpumalanga Township. A township in Mpumalanga. There is a township called Mpumalanga, Matsulu in Mpumalanga province. We also have Wentworth. We also have a story about narratives from citizens, youth in Orlando West, and of course we remember June 16 in that regard. We also have a community in KZN. Again, I think I spoke about Wentworth, and there are many other communities that we spoke to. In the 30 years of democracy, we have indeed been talking about numbers, how many schools have been built, how many universities have been built, how many houses we've built. Hardly have we talked about the meanings that people attach to that democracy 30 years. And the book seeks to address that particular gap, because it is not just water that people are looking for, it is also the dignity that accompanies that tap when water does not flow. The book then talks about themes around social justice and inequality, economic participation and inclusion, governance, accountability and institutional trust, citizenship, belonging and identity, and the everyday realities of ordinary women and youth, men of this country. In the book, we suggest 4 key moments of our democracy in the 30 years that I think would resonate with this audience today, because communities, indeed, men and women and youth, are particularly saying these things to us, not because of the disappointment of democracy, but in anticipation of the hope of another 30 years to come. So 4 key thematics that we again explored. Firstly, for communities in Qwaqwa and Wentworth, in Matsulu, democracy indeed delivered political freedom, but for them it is about social justice and dignity. And I think it speaks to what we are wanting to celebrate today, but also what we are wanting to ask in terms of the questions that we still need to address as a country. Our minister indeed has spoken about how this democracy, constitutional democracy, is a project. It's an ongoing project. It's not a linear, and it is filled with contradictions, and our communities are feeling the brunt of those contradictions. Many young people today are talking about structural disadvantages despite being born into freedom. They are saying that indeed they've inherited democracy, the born frees, right? But not always opportunity, and opportunity is important, because how many times have we heard, and the communities are already saying that they are saying we are lazy, they're saying we're not thinkers, and there are other new concepts about South Africans, Professor Ndlejana, I'm sure you know. South Africans and ordinary South Africans, particularly the youth, are saying opportunity and not handouts. Opportunity, not handouts, is important. They experience what we describe in the epilogue as freedom without mobility, democracy without dividends, and their words, not mine, right? I guess for us, as we are engaging with many communities, and they're giving us their lived experience of this 30 years of constitutional democracy, they are talking about rights, but they are also saying to us, dignity must be realized, and it's not political dignity that they are looking for, it is social. We will not talk about GBV, but social and economic justice that remains an unfinished work of our democracy. I want to appreciate the fact that the logo that was unveiled today talks about circle. It's a circle. These communities, and this is the second theme, these communities are saying to us that capability and material well-being remains important, that across all communities that we've interacted with, people spoke of democracy as both a milestone, but sometimes a myth for them. They are hopeful, however, in principle, but they are also saying that there needs to be justice for all. They spoke of schools without resources, infrastructure without maintenance. And yes, we have built the schools, but without maintenance, those schools 30 years are not sustainable in terms of infrastructure. And they are also talking about economic opportunities that remain out of reach. They confirm indeed what many scholars have talked about as democracy and development as about expanding people's capabilities, the opportunities, that the real freedom to live lives, the real freedom for their lives is through the value and their economic emancipation. And when a young person that we've interacted with has the right to education but cannot access meaningful employment, democracy for them feels incomplete. The third thematic that we indeed explored is this one, which is very important, that they are saying that democracy is for them very important. They will defend it. They will contest what the meanings that sometimes the elite want to impose on them. They want to also reimagine it, this democracy, from below, from their vantage point, because it has to make sense for them. And I was listening very carefully to the minister, and the minister is talking about recommitment. And Minister, I want to tell you that some of the community members are going to challenge you and are going to say to you, if we need to recommit, we need to recommit to something that's going to be of value and of benefit to us. So I'm just warning you, and I've noted, Minister, that you're going to be going to communities, which is something that is should be commended, Minister, because part of the democracy, the constitutional democracy in another 30 years that individuals are talking about in these communities is how much we do not listen as the elite. And in that not listening, it has indeed exacerbated what we talk about in the book as the crisis of social reproduction, the inability to produce oneself socially and economically. That indeed freedom should have outcomes that are very positive as they are talking about dividends. Fourthly, we often talk about the Africa we want, the South Africa we want. Indeed, all of these communities also reflected on the future that they want. And that future is collective, and I want to underline, and it is not because we knew that we were going to be invited here, Minister, but they're saying it needs to be ethical, social justice that is ethical, and for us as the HSRC, as we were listening very attentively and closely to the various communities across the country, they articulated a clear agenda for the future. They called for our government that is capable, that is accountable, institutions such as many of ours, including the HSRC, that is indeed accountable, and an inclusive economy that creates opportunities rather than reproducing inequalities. The communities are also very adamant that they want more of the state, not less of the state. And it is a conceptual, but it's also a very political argument that they're making, that the state must not be far from communities, but also the state must play that enabling role, unlike other dogmatic thinking about what the role of the state should be. And our constitution, and I'm very happy that we were reciting our constitution, it's as if our communities recite our constitution every day, Deputy Minister. Because in it, they're talking about diversity, but in it, they're also talking about the rights, but in it, they are also saying we want more of the state, not less of the state. And as we think about the many times that we want to sell most of our state and entities, we must also be cognizant about what the communities are saying. And in conclusion, for us, as we were thinking about this exercise that we embarked on as the HSRC and many other activities that we are embarking on to commemorate 30 years, it is important that we state what communities are saying and not gloss over them and not indeed ignore what the communities are saying. That numbers are important, but so is dignity. The future that they want is where democracy delivers dignity. It is one where young people, and there are a number of young people that I saw, and they're sitting right at the back, a future where young people see possibilities rather than exclusion. It is one where inequality is reduced, but not, as we have seen in recent times, not reproduced. It is one where institutions serve public with integrity. And this department is the custodian of at least that last part, and I think doing exceptionally well at that. Most importantly, it is a future that is already being built, because these communities are not just passive victims of what they are describing as a crisis of social reproduction. They are building, they are rebuilding, and they want to get involved. Indeed, there is urgency and agency in these communities, because this future is being built in classrooms, in clinics, in communities, and in the everyday actions of ordinary South Africans. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity to share our insights from Vuwani, from Matsulu, and Orlando West.
Thank you, Sarah. I knew you would tell it as it is. Mam Togo, could you please come and share with us your insights? Please, let's welcome her.
Thank you, Program Director. I will not go through the protocol, but I've just seen our minister who is serving in a portfolio where women had to ask for it because they felt that there was a need for them to be seen, to be heard in the narrative of the country. I will run through what I've written here to make sure that I keep to my time. The first part of it is to just say, Minister, it is quite an honor to be asked to come here to celebrate 30 years of our Constitution. I represent South African Women in Dialogue, but I also represent our generation. The generation that I represent is a generation that when we sit and we talk, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 80s, we say it's a generation that has seen it all. And I want to start by just saying we're a generation that is described by Charles Dickens in his 1859 novel based on France. The novel called A Tale of Two Cities. Those of you who did it at school will remember that iconic line that says, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, the best of times. We saw the worst of times and were saying, these times. It is up to you as analyzed to say, what are these times as we celebrate 30 years of our Constitution that is based on human rights, freedoms, equality, and human dignity. I've come to share a journey, especially based on lived experiences of women under this Constitution. But I also want to, as I do it, weave in my own experiences. The question is, do you see it as a glass half full or as a glass half empty? We, as civil society organizations, see our role as accompanying our communities, our people, activists, in achieving what this Constitution that we made sure is drafted through the submission of more than 1 million submissions, and this document came out. So we claim it as ours. The minister has talked a lot about the period before 1994. I once read a book based on the Jewish expression written by a Jewish person who wrote, "Lest we forget." And I always say to myself, unless we remember where we come from, we take for granted what we have and forget where we want to go. Before 1994, Black women in particular, and women under general, were denied rights. I weave in my own experience that when I started working, I could not I was shocked that I couldn't open a bank account. I needed my parent as an adult, or when I got married, my husband. And that was life at the time. And so the concept of human rights was not operational. The rights were racialized and gendered. And so when we talk about this constitution, we must keep going back to what was it, what is in the constitution, and what we hope for. And as women of South Africa, through the Women's National Coalition, we made sure that this constitution is very clear about equality, and especially in terms of gender. So I'll just run quickly through some of the clauses of the Constitution. Section 9 is our equality clause that says there shall be no discrimination on the grounds of sex, gender, pregnancy, and marital status. Today, there are people who have forgotten that there was actually discrimination on sex, on gender, on pregnancy. I remember my firstborn, when I had my firstborn, I could not have maternity leave. I gave birth, left the child at home, would go home to breastfeed during lunch break, go back to school, because there was no maternity leave. It allows for affirmative action to promote those disadvantaged by unfair discrimination. Section 10, human dignity. Everyone has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. Before 94, in law, a woman was a minor. You were not equal, and so you were regarded as a minor. And so when we made sure this constitution was drafted, I guess that's why they called an old person to share, because those are some of the realities. We wanted to make sure what we experience is never experienced by the next generation. We made sure that there is human dignity for everyone. Section 12, freedom and security of the person. Freedom from violence, both public, private, of all sources, torture included, and human degradation. When you went to prison in South Africa, like some of us, they tortured you. You had no rights. Today, your rights are read to you, even if you are in Kokstad. Your rights are still read to you these days, to the absolute annoyance of people who are victims of that criminal. Those are the realities of what we face in South Africa and the beauty of our constitution. Freedom of religion. Importance of protecting women where cultural and religious practices conflicted with the practices in churches. Today, we have churches led by women and bishops. In the past, no church was led by a woman. No woman could start a church. No woman could be a traditional leader, and so on. Freedom of association. I'm running through some of these things. Well, of course, everyone did not have freedom of association. You know, I always claim that this constitution liberated even white people, because white people could not associate with us, and we also couldn't associate with them. And so we saw each other as human beings, and we said freedom of association. Political rights. As I say, political rights were given to males, worse with black women who could not even vote before 1994. In our church, I was in Grahamstown in 1994, there was an 80-year-old woman who voted for the first time and she cried. And she said, now I can die. Small things, but important because she had that dignity. Section 10, citizenship. Colonialism and apartheid simply took away citizenship from Black South Africans. The minister has talked to us about the various homelands. And so there were people who were South Africans and people who were Xhosas and Vendors and Zulus and etc. in a country that belonged to all of us, especially Black people, indigenous to this land. Freedom of movement, women who wanted to get pregnant and come to urban areas to get pregnant because their husband worked in mines, they were arrested if they were found in Soweto because they needed permission. So they could not even reside there. Property. We couldn't own land as women, and today we can own land. And one of the landmark cases that we talk about a lot as women that intersected politics, culture, and oppression is the Bear case in Magistrate, where in Cape Town, where a woman challenged the customary law. You see, that's how this constitution touches everyone, including traditional, challenge the customary law to take over the property of the home because she believes as an elder in the home, she had the right to own that home. And there are many such women who could not take over homes, rather have your son, who, because he's male, to take over the home. The ruling therefore allowed women and children to inherit estates and doing away with discrimination. Healthcare, Section 27, that has been talked about a lot. I will skip that one. The rights of children. Children were seen and not heard. This constitution says the right of a child is paramount. And culturally, children were not heard. Religiously, children were not seen. Politically, they were not in any constitution. They were not there, especially Black children. Today, they have a right. Section 187, we have our Commission of Gender Equality that oversees issues of gender in the country. It does not exclude all the other entities that are here, NPA included, to make sure that we're treated equally as women in South Africa. And of late, I've talked about the Ministry of Women. So post-1990, I'll run through some of the laws that have helped us. In terms of Labor Employment Equity Act, so again, we're saying these things because the pushback, the reality of the pushback in South Africa is there. So anyone who's going to say, I agree with an agenda of pushback, must know they're trampling on the history and the rights fought for, died for by the people of South Africa. The Employment Equity Act was not intended to make anyone unhappy, but it was made to balance the scales. Basic conditions of employment. You cannot be fired because people want to fire you now. You have rights as a worker. And so because you have the rights as a worker, due process must be followed. Painful as it is, you can't be shot and put in a pigsty as happened in Limpopo. Labor Relations Act, collective rights. Violence and personal security. Domestic Violence Act, I can't talk, elaborate, we all know. that you could be beaten up and pulped, and when you go to a traditional court, they ask you, what did you do? Explain yourself. You go to the police, they ask you the same thing, sit down, let's talk this matter out. Instead of making sure that the perpetrator is a perpetrator. We're lucky that we now have all the amendments to that Domestic Act and Criminal Law and Amendment Act. Protection from Harassment Act. 2021 GBV Acts, and I'm putting all the positives, not saying towards the end I will just run quickly. Family and Customary Law and Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. In the past, men would come to Johannesburg, work and have customary wives, give birth, those wives have 10 children, or you have a home affairs wife here, and a customary wife at home, and one of them had no right because in terms of the custom, it was not in the law. Now, men get caught out, and women have rights to say, sir, I also have rights with my children. Choice of termination. And the beauty of this constitution, not everything you like is in the constitution. But you respect the right of choice of the individual. Termination of pregnancy was not there. And so young people would die in the streets through backstreet abortion. Now, people can go, if they are raped, to hospitals, even if they are in a situation they cannot keep the child, there is a dignified way of dealing with those things. Land and property, yes. I want to just quickly talk about then and now and the judges. 1994, there were only 2 judges, female judges, out of 165 judges. And today, we can't even count. We're just grateful. 30% to 40, we're almost there to 50%. So for that, we are grateful. Who is at the Constitutional Court leading us? It is a young woman from a rural area in the Eastern Cape. Did we know it will ever happen? No. Do we celebrate? No. Do we still have issues? Yes. Social protection and grants. We have SASSA. Some people don't like SASSA because, as was said here, it promotes dependency in some instances, but it is a safety net for communities, for people who cannot on their own be able to get there. But the beauty of our constitution, it does not, one thing that I personally think we need in the reframing of the constitution, Minister, is to be very clear that the right, every right goes with a responsibility. We did not stress the responsibility in the past 30 years. We actually need to stress responsibilities as well, so that when you enjoy the right, you also ask yourself, what are the responsibilities? Grants, child support grants, 13 million children who probably would not have food because there are grants. Old age grants, disability grants. 94, we didn't even listen to the budget speech because it said nothing about us. Today we listen because we want to see how much more we're going to get from the grant. Seriously. Water, the basic services for the indigent people, electricity. I drove past villages 2 weekends ago, and it was just all electricity, but I did ask myself, I wonder if everybody in this village pays for their electricity. Those are the responsibilities we must talk about as citizens as well, to ask ourselves, what are we throwing back in building this nation? Representation in parliament and cabinet. We are now in 94 with 27%. We are almost 50% now. The cabinet, 50% plus, etc. Local government, 40, 50. Women in leadership and public sector, that's why we have our Auditor General here, because it's no longer an issue. People no longer say, can she do it, can she not do it? Women have proven that they have. And civil society has also been working hard to make sure that women are helped to see and claim their space. Housing, same. Land reform, same. Health, I'm just rushing through. Education and transformation. Today, they say girls in graduation are, in numbers, are higher than males, but we want them more in PhDs now. That's what we are working at as civil society. We would need more PhD women in South Africa as we have seated there. We need more. Same with university. And what are the persistent challenges in South Africa? I will run through them. Gender pay gap remains an issue in some areas of work. GBV is a huge challenge in South Africa. It's almost like we no longer know what to do. The laws are there, the structures are there. What more do we need to do? What some of people are saying in the civil society, what we need to do is the change of attitudes and people understanding what this constitution, what obligations there are to you as a human being towards another human being, which is, I think, what the minister said, was said by Justice Albisek, that this constitution is supposed to make everyone smile, not some people smile. However, we also, in terms of economic participation, we can't say it enough. Unemployment is a huge issue. So the question is, how do we change around issues such that this constitution enables people not only to be employed, but to get an education that helps them to employ others. In other words, to be creative. And so some people are saying, and we must put it out there, people are saying, maybe the closure of technicons took away a lot in terms of the creativity and people employing others. Some of the other losses are although we have victories in terms of LGBTQI plus communities, but there is a lot of pushback in South Africa. So what is our way forward? I've skipped a number of them. First one that some of the people are saying is inner transformation alongside structural reform, education of boys and men in equality and reverence to all, economic systems designed around sustainability, not extraction, community-based leadership rooted in compassion, women claiming leadership not in reaction to oppression, but in partnership with all in their communities, and citizens embracing that all rights go with responsibility. And so we call for balanced